Today we're talking about the latest NHL trade rumors, including Jeff Petry, the Montreal Canadiens. Where might he end up? We have a potential landing spot for him. We also have some updates on rumors regarding the Florida Panthers, Nashville Predators, and the Anaheim Ducks. We also have some updates on injuries and the All-Star game. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss today. First up, we got word today that Alex Ovechkin, unfortunately, will be out of the lineup this evening versus the Oilers, and he will also miss the All-Star game due to a positive COVID test, which is obviously one of the few players, obviously, that hasn't had it as of yet. So I know I've heard many people say it's quite a feat for him not to have contracted COVID here so far, not miss any time. At least he'll only miss the one game, because by the time the All-Star break's over, theoretically he should be able to return. This will be the second consecutive All-Star game that he does miss, the last one being in 2020 when he actually got a one-game suspension for not going, even though he was selected to go. I know there's been some people saying, oh, how convenient, because we know Ovechkin hasn't been as big of a fan going to these here in his later years, but I don't really think that appears to be the case. I don't really see how he could fabricate the test, for starters. And there's also reports that apparently his wife was on her way back. She was over apparently in Moscow with the kids. The kids, I believe, are staying over there with family, and she was traveling back to North America and was going to go with him to Vegas for the All-Star festivities. So that doesn't really appear to be the case here, but he is going to be out either way. Tom Wilson's going to be replacing him, and apparently Jonathan Marchessault has also been named to the All-Star game. He's not replacing anybody. He's not necessarily going to participate, I guess. Where obviously the game is in Vegas, and he's a deserving member of the Golden Knights. He's kind of like on standby. If anybody else, especially in the Western Conference, is not able to participate, then he will be there ready to go. Now, quick update too from the waiver wire. Yesterday, the Oilers have placed defenseman Slater Cuckoo on waivers. He did indeed clear, which is not overly shocking, but a little bit of a surprise. I thought somebody might pick him up, but he indeed clears, so he can be assigned to the taxi squad. And the Buffalo Sabres today placed goaltender Michael Hauser on waivers. Now, it's debatable whether or not he gets picked up. I'm going to say probably not. He has very limited NHL action, 29 years old, an undrafted goalie who spent a lot of time in the minors, played in 3 different leagues this year between the East Coast, American League, and NHL. But its limited NHL games have been actually pretty decent. So you never know, I guess. I mean, there's certainly teams out there who could use some help in between the pipes. So maybe he gets picked up, but I'm going to say probably not. And he likely ends up going back down to the minors here once that's all said and done. Now that the Sabres are finally getting some more healthy goalies back, including Anderson, and I believe Tokarski's returning as well. We got an update here on Josh Norris of the Senators. Of course, he's been out with a shoulder injury after taking a hard fall into the boards. Looks as though they're sending him to get a second opinion. He did have a shoulder injury that required surgery back before he was in the NHL when he was in college, and it sounds like he wants to go see that same surgeon, or at least have a consult. It's probably not going to be an in-person visit, but all of the imaging and everything that they would have taken is going to be referred to him for a second opinion. They're going to find out what he thinks, but right now they're estimating that he's going to be under the Senators lineup for about 3 to 4 weeks. Obviously, with the All-Star break coming up here, that'll certainly cut down some of those days on how many games he misses, but the Sens have a super busy schedule coming up here, considering all the games that they had postponed. They just came off a real busy stretch here as well. You could tell last night against the Islanders that they were exhausted after having a lot of games here in a short period of time. So he's certainly going to be missed in the lineup until he gets back, but hopefully he won't be out as long a term as Drake Batherson, who's also out, but he's expected to be out for more like 2 months instead of 1. So either way, not great news there for the Senators. Have been dealing with a fair share of injury and adversity here as of late. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of trade talk to look at. Things are certainly starting to heat up in the rumor mill when it comes to lots of different players that are on the market or likely going to be moved or could be moved. Some quick updates here. One, let's look at the Anaheim Ducks first. The Ducks obviously are in the midst of hiring a new GM. NHL insiders aren't quite sure exactly when that's going to happen, but some have said it could be this week, but it could also, maybe push into next week, but it shouldn't be too long. We know Pat Verbeek is a leading contender, as well as a few other internal candidates, including Solomon, who's the internal, right now the interim GM, and then of course Nonis is there as well. So we'll see where they go, but either way, regardless of who gets that job, one of their big decisions right off the bat is handling the trade deadline, which is going to be big for the Ducks. We know that they're trending to the, maybe being a playoff team, which is good, but it's also, makes it tougher to make some of these decisions when you have pending unrestricted free agents who may or may not be a part of your team's future. Obviously, the youth of the team is a big part of the team's resurgence this year. Terry really came through. Ziggers is having a tremendous season. Obviously, they have an all-star goaltender in John Gibson between the pipes, and they have some real solid defensemen that are expiring contracts like Hampus Lindholm and Josh Manson. And then, of course, you get Getzlaf and Raquel in the forward group. And you just don't really know what to do. It's hard to say what direction they go. But many feel, including Elliot Friedman, who said that he doesn't think that they can really afford to go into the offseason not knowing the status of Lindholm and leaving him unsigned. If they're going to not have him signed by the time they get to that, then the odds of losing him obviously are pretty good. And he feels that he's too important of a piece and too, just too important there that they can't afford to do that. So it's very possible that even if they're trending towards the playoffs, if they feel he's not going to sign, there's a good chance he gets traded. However, they are likely going to consider between him and Manson keeping at least one of them. Now, it is possible that maybe they lock up both of them. I wouldn't completely rule that out, but it does seem a little less likely that there's a good chance that at least one of them ends up departing either via trade or via free agency in the offseason. But it seems like Lindholm is the top priority amongst all those UFAs. If they get him signed, then I think that's going to really increase the likelihood that Manson gets traded. I wouldn't rule out a re-signing in the offseason for Manson back there if that's a possibility too. But we know, like I mentioned before, the Leafs are really hardcore interested in Manson. Lindholm's had a number of teams that have been inquiring on him as well, but it's all kind of wait-and-see approach right now. They really don't want to make any rash decisions until they get a permanent general manager in place, and he's certainly the top one to get looked after, and then that will determine kind of what else they do here. So if Lindholm signs, expect Manson to go. If he doesn't and it looks like they're going to lose him, then I would expect Lindholm to get moved, and maybe they'll turn their attention to Manson and maybe keep him, but likely one of them ends up going out the door. Now, when it comes to the Nashville Predators, they're obviously having a better season than many of us predicted. In Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts blog that came out today, there were some quotes and conversations regarding the Preds and some of their moves that they may or may not make down towards the deadline, including Philip Forsberg. Now, David Poile was quoted as saying that he likes his team and doesn't want to really change many things about it. But I did find part of this, one of the thoughts, I guess you could call it, from Elliot's blog, and I'll show it to you here on the screen. It's a little bit concerning and thinking that, you know what, there's still a chance that Forsberg gets dealt, even though the Predators are having a solid year. He says, I don't want to get myself boxed in. Not my preference, but never say never. When he was asked about Forsberg going into the playoffs and offseason unsigned. So clearly it's not his first choice and it's not his preference to go past the deadline with an unsigned Forsberg, because he obviously probably figures, like many, if you've tried negotiating all that time and you haven't been able to get a deal done, the odds of losing him as a free agent in the offseason are pretty good. But I mean, Forsberg certainly having a great season. He's going to command some pretty good money on the open market if he makes it there. So I still think, based on these comments here and what Friedman's saying in his blog, that as good of a season as Nashville's having, if Forsberg remains unsigned at the deadline, I still think there's a possibility that they trade him. Obviously, it depends on what the what the market dictates, what kind of offers they get. Maybe they decide not to go down that road, but I wouldn't rule it out based on these comments here from David Poile. When it comes to the Florida Panthers, we've talked a bit about before how they're kind of looking at a number of things. They're expected to likely add a defenseman. They've been rumored to be in on Klingberg in Dallas, Chikrin in Arizona, and they may even add elsewhere as well. But that's probably the main area that they look to, is an extra solid defenseman to really round out that D-core. And we had heard from Jeff Merrick that the main name being shopped around to facilitate a trade, or the centerpiece, I guess, would be a youngster Owen Tippett. And we learned today as well through Friedman's blog that another name to watch in that is Frank Vatrano. Now, of course, Vatrano is a guy who signed in Florida as a free agent. Had some good times down there. He's actually been a decent performer for the Panthers. But he is a pending unrestricted free agent, getting into his later 20s now, and given the depth of the forward group, probably unlikely that he returns via free agency. I would imagine he's probably not going to be re-signed. Not to say that they haven't valued him there, but I think it's probably time to move on. They have so many other players that are playing higher up in the lineup that they've made additions here in the last couple of years, like Reinhart and Verhaeghe, and Lundell's really having an awesome rookie season. So like they can afford to let Vetrano leave via free agency if he doesn't get traded. But you can imagine like a package of Tippett and Vetrano maybe being offered in a trade. I mean, Vetrano had a solid year last year in a shortened season. He put up 18 goals but in 56 games, so he played a full campaign. But this year in 40 games, he only has 8 goals. So he's certainly, putting up less goals. The numbers aren't quite there, but he's probably fair to say as well that he's not getting as big of a role with the additions that they've made. That, he's certainly playing lower in the lineup, and that probably has a big impact. Less ice time, different line mates. It's going to impact things for sure. But Tippett and Vetrano, the main ones Florida is offering around trade packages to accommodate what they're looking for on the blue line. Now, when it comes to Vancouver, we've heard a lot about JT Miller, Connor Garland, Brock Besser, Tanner Pearson. They're all kind of out there right now, and a lot of it's going to depend on what the team gets for offers before they really make a decision. But we know, and we've talked about a few times now, that Rutherford and the new GM there, Patrick Allvin, want to create some cap space. They need more flexibility. For a team that's not in the playoffs right now and possibly not going to make the playoffs, you can't be capped out like that. You need to have more flexibility to continue to grow as a team, and they don't have that. So one of these guys likely is going to get moved to create that flexibility. Now, we've heard a lot about JT Miller, and Friedman talks about in his blog today the fact that he feels that at least one team was taking a hard run at making a trade. Obviously, the package was probably decent, but not enough to make the Canucks say yes, and he believes that team to be the New York Rangers. So that's not a surprise based on what we had heard previously, but it's also a given here based on what he's saying that he wouldn't rule out Miller re-signing in Vancouver. It's not a for sure thing that they even want to trade him. They just, like I said, their goal here is flexibility. They're not entirely convinced in how they're going to get that. It's going to be one of these guys probably that goes, and it's just going to really boil down to what the offers are and what they feel makes the most sense long term. But JT Miller has one more year left on his contract. He wouldn't be eligible to sign an extension until the offseason, until he officially enters the last year of that contract. And it's also been known that we've heard that he wants to play in the U.S. if he is traded. So, does he want to re-sign in Vancouver? It's difficult to say, right? So we really don't know where things are at with Miller, but obviously, it's a possibility here if they feel like he's just too big a part of the team and they talk to the player and his agent that they could wait, not trade him, and work out an extension in the offseason. We wouldn't completely rule that out, but they're going to be having conversations not only with other teams to gauge the market value, but with the players and their agents as well to kind of gauge what they think and feel about their long-term futures in the team as well, and then decide accordingly what they feel is the best course of action. But don't think it's a given here that Miller ends up getting dealt. Now, when it comes to Jeff Petry and the Montreal Canadiens, that's a new situation that's come to light recently here in the past couple of days, with it being known that Petry indeed has let the team know that he's not demanding a trade, but he would welcome a trade, and certainly it looks as though his passion to be there and his heart doesn't seem to be in it based on how he's playing. I think that's very apparent, and Petry probably would benefit from a fresh start somewhere else. But of course, he's approaching his mid-30s and still has 3 years on his contract at $6.25 million. That's not going to be easy to do, but the Habs have made it known that they're not just going to give him away, and they probably are kind of expecting teams to trade for him based on his history, not so much on the current year. Yes, he's having a bad season, but he's got a long career of being very successful and very valuable, so that should be more of a basis to look at than just the recent body of work there. However, when it comes to Petry, he was mentioned on TSN Insider Trading, and Pierre LeBrun, who said he was advised with different executives that they could see a deal with him maybe going to the Dallas Stars. Now, the Dallas Stars, of course, have John Klingberg on the block right now, who's a pending UFA. They obviously don't want to go anywhere near what he wants for a contract. Of course, Klingberg's a little bit younger than Petry, but still similar type of defenseman. That's fair to say. They're both pretty good when it comes to the offense. They both play a similar style. Klingberg, I believe, is like 29, whereas Petry is like 34, so he's a little bit older. But Klingberg's looking for like a 7-year contract, 7-8 years at like $8 million, so like $60 million. Whereas they can get Petry for 3 more years at $6.25. Maybe Montreal retains a little bit to even knock that down. that might be a better deal. They still get a right shot defenseman with a real solid offensive history, good size, similar player, right? It might be a way for them to kind of replace Klingberg for less money on the cap. But at the same time, if you look at Dallas's roster, what kind of trade would there be? What would satisfy Montreal's needs if they go indeed do that? It's likely going to have to be a combination of picks and prospects. I'm not sure there's really a lot on the roster. If you look at A, what would Montreal want? And B, what would Dallas be willing to give up? I mean, if you look at the blue line, you're not going to probably get a defenseman back. I mean, for starters, you got Lindell and Suter have no move clauses. They're not trading Heiskanen. And do you take Klingberg out? Would they maybe move Yanni Hakanpää? Maybe, that's a possibility. But that's only $1.5 million on his contract. Good defenseman for sure. I think Montreal would probably benefit from him. But that's not going to be enough to get a Petry trade done. Maybe there's something else in the mix. I don't know what it would be. Looking through the forward group, they have a bunch of UFAs coming up, like Pavelski and Radulov. Ben and Seguin aren't going anywhere because of those contracts, and they have control over it anyway. There's just not a lot there that I think Dallas would be willing to move, that Montreal would be interested in. So it might be tough to figure things out. But in a lot of ways, it does make a lot of sense, right? Petry to Dallas to replace Klingberg gets them on a shorter term, less money, similar player. I get the where some of these people are coming from and where the rumor kind of generated from, and I'm not saying it won't happen. I think it's a great landing spot. I'm just not sure what it's going to take to get it done. That's looking at what Dallas can offer. I'm just not really sure in that regard. If they're willing to offer some picks and prospects, that might be enough to satisfy Montreal. But if you look at their Dallas's cap situation, they would need to shed some salary to make it work. So how they do that, I don't know. They do have a little bit of flexibility going into next year, but if they want to have a shot of replacing guys like Pavelski or Radulov, or either resigning them or whatever, it's going to be challenging. You throw another defenseman in the mix with that kind of money. That's the whole reason why they're likely not able to sign and keep John Klingberg. And they're also a little leery of giving him the long term at his age as well. But we'll see. Either way, it could happen. But I think personally, Detroit is also another great option. They have the space. They have the flexibility. They could use a veteran guy there as well. He's from the area. He's a Michigan guy. To me, that makes a lot of sense. And Detroit, I think, would have more assets when it comes to maybe a couple of younger players or something that would interest Montreal if they're going to be going down the road of a rebuild. But let me know your thoughts on everything discussed today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.